So this morning it's just us and employees. Oh, yeah. And the morning session goes from 10 to 12.
Commissioner Shepherd, it's Tavisha. Can you hear us? Commissioner Shepherd, it's Tavisha. Can you hear me? Commissioner Shepherd, it's Tavisha. Can you hear me? Commissioner Shepherd, it's Tavisha. Are you able to hear me?
Try that now.
Commissioner Shepherd, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I couldn't before.
Perfect. Commissioner Van Voorthuizen is here, and we have counsel for O'Kane, K&K, Oldfield, ME and Seaforth Farm here, and she will introduce the submitters.
Kia ora tātou. Good morning, everyone. We have come to day 7 of the hearings, and we'd like to start with the submission of Seaforth Farm.
Good morning, Commissioners. Council's name is Nicola Hornsey. I appear for Kevin and Karen O'Kane, who are listed as the third submitters this morning. Yesterday we held a meeting with members of the Seadown Water Users Enhancement Group, and with the Commissioner's permission, it is hoped that the order presentations this morning could be altered so that Mr O'Kane would present first, followed by Mr Callagher from Seaforth Farms, and then by Mr Oldfield.
Well, I haven't had the opportunity to discuss this with my colleague. This catches us unawares. You'll have to allow me to ask Commissioner Van Voorthuizen whether he has anything to contribute to that proposal. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Commissioner Shepherd. I don't have any concerns about the reorder. A lot of the issues raised by the submitters are reasonably similar, so I'm comfortable with the suggestion if you are.
Well, Ms Hornsey, I'm also content that we do it, but it will mean that the preparations that we have made so that we have the right submission before us at the right time will need to allow us a bit of extra time to find the submission that's being addressed at a particular time. Although, of course, I recognise my colleague's remark that the general thrust of the submissions is similar. So, Ms Hornsey, by all means, you proceed, but just tell us which one we're going to have first and give us a moment to find it.
Thank you very much, sir. The first one is for Kevin and Karen O'Kane. The submitter ID number is 354.
Well, I have Mr O'Kane's submission, and I also have the hearing statement that you sent to us on his behalf. So would you like to continue?
Thank you. We do acknowledge from the outset that the minute or hearing minutes have not been strictly complied with, and as Mr O'Kane has attempted to explain, he had not appreciated that evidence in a formal sense was required, and we are seeking the indulgence of the panel in terms of receiving a rather full hearing statement. Mr O'Kane is hoping to be able to speak to that very briefly and just to highlight a few key points from that. I have also prepared legal submissions, but again, I acknowledge that they are very late. They have been filed, and I will leave it up to the commissioners to determine whether or not they wish to receive those, or whether I may speak to them.
Well, certainly there's no objection to you presenting whatever it's appropriate for us to receive, and we won't, of course, have had the opportunity to see the submissions in advance, so you should present them to us fully. And would you like to present the legal submissions first, or would you like for Mr O'Kane to speak to the hearing statement that we already have?
If I may present my legal submissions, that may then make some sense of the hearing statement that Mr O'Kane has prepared.
Thank you.
The original submission was quite full, and it is now the intention of Mr and Mrs O'Kane to solely focus their request for relief to the issue of augmentation. In the original submission, they sought a new policy be added to the Timaru Freshwater Management Unit part of the plan that dealt with the health of the Washtike Lagoon, to which the Seadown drain contributes. They're also seeking that the plan contain two new rules, specifically dealing with the potential to augment the Seadown drain. The reason for that is that under the proposed plan, the constraints on their ability to access water because of the imposition of a new minimum flow on the Seadown drain, coupled with the inability to locate any deep groundwater, means that they are seeking to keep their options open by having the plan provide for augmentation specifically for the Seadown drain. In the original submission, there was a request for a lowering of the minimum flow in the Seadown drain from 150 litres per second to 100 litres per second. And it's something that Mr O'Kane and all the other members of the Seadown group who are here today would like to see. However, they are very cognizant of the fact that no evidence has been provided on this, with the exception of the inclusion of a report by Dr Ryder prepared in 2016, and so that it is perhaps unrealistic to expect that the commissioners would feel that they were in a position to change the flow that is set out in the proposed plan. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't like it, however. As Mr O'Kane will explain, the Seadown drain is part of the existing environment, and it has been since 1938. The users of the water in that area have little if no control over the amount of water that comes into the Seadown drain. It's currently provided primarily from bywash from the Levels Plains irrigation scheme, which in turn is provided from releases from the Apua Dam. So it's submitted that by allowing in the plan provisions for augmentation of the Seadown drain, this would provide options for the users in the area to augment the flow in the drain and thus comply with the plan and provide a clear consenting pathway for them as they go to renew their consents or they are reviewed. Just turn to comments on the Section 42A report, which notes that there is very little research or study on either the Washtike Lagoon or the Seadown drain, but notes that some study is currently underway. The report writers maintain that an alternative source of water perhaps ought to be identified before these requested rules are included in the plan. It's my submission that this is not required, that we are merely seeking a consenting pathway and that it would be up to the users themselves to source additional water to support any such application. The report writer also suggests that the regional rules, the general rules, are sufficient to cover an application for augmentation. With respect, in this instance, it's submitted that it is appropriate for specific rules to be incorporated. Those general rules being too broad and too uncertain for this group. Similar rules are provided for elsewhere in the plan, so we're not proposing anything unusual or different. And it's submitted that the draft rule, or two rules that are set out in the original submission, sufficiently cover all matters that should be taken into consideration. There is also a suggested definition for augmentation, which would be specific to the Timaru Freshwater Management Unit, and I have set that out in my written submissions. And finally, it's submitted that to include these rules, the policy and the definition would not be in conflict with the 2020 National Policy Statement for fresh water. The main aim of maintaining the flow is to maintain connectivity with the Washdyke Lagoon, the Seadown Drain being one of two of the main contributaries to that lagoon, which has low water quality and does need attention. So in summary, Mr and Mrs O'Kane are committed to improving the environment and understand that as farmers they have a very important role to play in achieving this, but it is hoped that the panel will find that without the ability to access reliable water, which includes the ability to augment the Seadown Drain, their ability to continue farming and make continual improvements will be significantly compromised. And for these reasons, we are seeking that the additions to the plan as set out in the original submission be made.
Thank you, Ms Hornsey. Commissioner Van Hoort, is there any questions of the council?
Possibly, but maybe I might wait to hear from Mr O'Kane first, because my questions aren't legal, really issues of legality. They're more about just trying to understand the proposal. So I may not need to ask them after I hear from Mr O'Kane, so I'll just pause for now if that's all right, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. Well, I wonder if I could just ask a couple of questions at this stage of council, because I'm not quite clear in my mind about the proposal. What status of consent would you have in mind that would be available if this pathway that you're proposing was adopted?
I anticipate that it would be a consent for the discharge of water.
Yes, but are you proposing that it be a controlled activity, a non-complying activity,
I beg your pardon,
somewhere
sir.
in the range between them?
A restricted discretionary activity.
Thank you. You made some reference about the general rules not being appropriate because they were too uncertain, if I correctly understood your submission. Is certainty a possibility?
No, sir.
We're talking about a consent proposal, aren't we?
Yes. My submission is really that the group would like to ensure that they are not prohibited from seeking consent to augment the Seadown Drain. And on the reading of the two current very broad general rules, there is concern that they may well be.
Do you want to expose the reason for that suggestion?
may have to look at that a little closer, sir.
All right. Well, thank you. The other question I was wanting to ask relates to your proposal for a definition of the term augmentation, and you acknowledge that there is a general definition, but you want a separate definition for this particular group of properties. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, sir. As I understand it, throughout the plan as a whole, there are several different definitions of augmentation relating to various specific catchments. For example, the Hines catchment and the Selwyn-Waihora catchment. And on that basis, we are seeking under the Timaru Freshwater Management Unit a definition of augmentation that refers to the sea-down drain.
Is none of the existing definitions appropriate?
Not on my reading, sir.
Can you help me to have an understanding why we can't use one of the existing definitions?
My understanding, sir, is that in the definition section at the beginning of the plan itself, there is no definition of augmentation. It appears throughout the plan as a catchment-specific definition.
And can we use one of those catchment-specific definitions and make it specific also to this catchment?
That is actually what we've tried to do, sir. Each one is individual and relates to the specific catchment that it is in. And so the wording that we're proposing here is specific to the sea-down drain and the Washtake Lagoon. It may be simpler for augmentation to be defined as a term at the start of the plan. That wasn't an option I had considered.
Well, I don't think it's an option available to us at the moment.
No.
Very well, Ms. Hornsey. Well, now, are you wanting to proceed to Mr. O'Kane's statement?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Mr. O'Kane.
Yep, good morning.
Thank you for coming in. We have the text of the statement in front of you, and I'm not quite sure whether you are planning to read it all to us or whether you're going to, yes, it's a substantial piece, or whether you're going to give us a summary or just take us to the main thrust.
Probably just to, good morning, Commissioners. Yeah, I'll just highlight the main points really, if that's okay, because yeah.
Yes. Just whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, righto. I'll get right into it. So the key outcome I'm seeking from the plan change is the inclusion and the ability to augment the sea-down drain, so that the minimum flow is maintained and the members of the Sea-Down Water Users Enhancement Group, which are all sitting behind me here today, can continue to irrigate while the minimum flow in the Sea-Down drain is maintained. So, look, we've looked at we've looked at other alternatives in the area, myself, and there's been 4 or 5 of us in this area that have looked for deep water, and we drilled down to 130 or 132 metres, I think, and we didn't find any water, and as a couple of our other submitters will say, that will explain, they've had no success with that as well. I suppose just a brief history on the C-down drain, and just to give you, I'm assuming you've already read it, but probably a clearer.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, look, it was a man-made drain that runs along parallel to the coast from Beach Road in the north down into the Washtake Lagoon, and as part of that hearing statement I sent in, there was a map in there which probably provides a fairly good a display of how the drain exists. So the drain came about from back in 1936 when the initial levels plain irrigation scheme was founded. It was flood irrigation, and the flood irrigation it all come down through the levels plain and ended up in C-down, and C-down became a swamp, and so they drained C-down. The C-down drain was installed 2 years later in 1938 to remove that water so that the farmers in the area there was pretty soggy ground. So that was those initial works were run by what was the Ministry of Works.
The Public Works Department, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think they changed their name to the Ministry of Works about 1942, so I think it could have been the Public Works Department in 1938.
Okay, yeah, but before my time, but anyway. And so, yeah, the water that in the C-down drain primarily comes from levels plain, and it's what they call the wash water that they use to push the water down from where it comes out of from the Opua, and then and then the push water's ended up in the at the top end of the C-down drain near Beach Road. And look, I've spoken to Opua that run the levels plain irrigation area, and there's no accurate measure of the amount of wash water that's going into the drain currently, but that they've said to me that they think it's between 30 to 60 litres a second during the irrigation season from October through to May, and when the restrictions. Sorry.
The bypass comes to how much?
Oh, there's no accurate measures on it, but from the work that they've done on some of the meters they've got, they believe it's between 30 to 60 litres a second.
Right. Thank you.
Just during the irrigation season, and when the restrictions are placed on the Opua Dam releases, the amount of wash water reduces, and therefore that affects the flow in the C-down drain. So I suppose, and then the other point, so the drainage system contains water from mixed sources, namely the Opua Dam and the Levels Plain. The C-down drain itself provides a significant population of mahinga kai in the form of eels, and is part of the Runanga Mataitai Reserve. And so over time the drain has become an important part of the water feeding system into the Washtake Lagoon, which was set out in the report, in the Dr. Greg Ryder's report. So for us, the consequences of not being able to augment the C-down drain will affect our irrigation takes. And this is there's 1,800 hectares that are tied to the C-down drain under the new Plan Change 7, that inventory report that come out. So of that 1,800 hectares, I think I've outlined, it's about 1,000 hectares is dairy land and 870 hectares is cropping. And just on a personal note for I believe that if we are unable to augment the seed-down drain, further we'll have a greater water restrictions, and that will affect the value of our assets that we own and farm from. And I believe that our asset base, with a loss of the water reliability, would devalue by up to about 31%. And the other factors it will have on the community will be currently of the 1,800 hectares in the seed-down, tied to the seed-down drain, is about current staff employed of about 55 people. I've done some work and gone around and talked to all of the members of the group, and just under irrigation restrictions, we think that number would come down to about 23. And so those are just the immediate financial and social implications to the 1,800 hectares tied to the seed-down drain. On a personal level, as a family farm under the new irrigation plan 7, under the new PC7, without the ability to augment the seed-down drain, our dairy farming business would not be able to survive. Probably mainly due to our business has low equity levels, and any spare cash we've used in the past, has been used to pay off debt. With unreliable irrigation and our on-farm expenses increasing by at least, I think, 27%, mainly through extra feed brought in to try and compensate for our unreliable irrigation, and that erodes directly off our bottom line and our ability to pay down debt. Our bank would not be as accommodating under this situation and would be forced to sell. So just on how we got to where we, on a personal level, how we got to where we are, look, we obtained our dairy farm by working up through the share milking ladder until we're able to sell cows and purchase the farm. This has not been without its challenges, both financially, physically and mentally. We're committed to a sustainable farming and environmental future, but the future is dependent on our ability to have reliable irrigation. And to do this, we're looking to achieve this through augmentation of the seed-down drain. That, Commissioner, is probably is the bullet points that I really wanted to get across in our submission.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. O'Kane. That's very helpful. Commissioner Van Voorthuizen, any questions of Mr. O'Kane?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much for that. How far along Beach Road does seed-down drain commence? I'm just looking at Google Maps at the moment, and I see there's a little thing called Sea-Down, and Beach Road goes towards the sea. How far along Beach Road does it commence?
I've got a pretty big map here that might be, I'm not sure if Commissioner Shepherd, but I can show you from...
If you hold it up.
Yeah, righto. So, if you hold it up, I'll just probably... So we've got the coast here. The seed-down drain sort of starts, it's a big wide flood plain, and then comes right along the coast there, and a measuring point there. The other thing about it, with coastal erosion, in the next 5 years, there is going to have to be parts of the seed-down drain that are going to have to be moved inland. So that's where it starts, and these coloured lines here are the water races for the Levels Plain irrigation scheme, and that drops into the seed-down drain, probably nearer the coast on Beach Road.
All right. Okay, so that was my next question. So the Level Plains bywash, it's a direct discharge to the drain from the end of one of the races, is it?
Yes, yeah.
And are you all on groundwater takes?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no one in your group takes from the sea-down drain itself?
Yes, there is 2 takes.
There's 2 takes, but they're not-
Currently we're not using them.
Okay.
and of the 1,800 hectares in the sea-down drain, currently 180 odd hectares are tied to the sea-down drain minimum flow.
Yep.
But
yep,
under the
yep.
new thing, all the
And so the 2 takes from the drain itself, how come they're not being used at the moment, just out of interest?
Because we're trying our best to not use them, because it has the impact that has.
Impacts on the flow in the drain. And
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But
Yeah.
at the moment, the drains touch and go whether we can irrigate or not, and if someone directly takes out of it, then everybody is penalised.
Yeah, okay.
Can I interrupt just to ask?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know who it was who was speaking, or at least I don't.
Sorry.
Wayne Kelleher from Seaforth Farm, so he's a submitter coming up next.
Well,
Okay.
thank you.
So I guess, obviously a key question in the 42A officers pointed towards this as well. You've obviously thought about augmentation. Where would the water come from?
Look, we haven't gone down that track at the moment, but I have had discussions with Opua.
Okay.
They haven't slammed the door in my face when I've turned up there. So and they're aware of that they are putting water into the sea-down drain.
Mhm.
And I realise there is issues around the mixing of waters, and like Luke Rayhana, who's too long for me, is he's part of our group and is also and part of the Arafenua people and iwi, and so he has talked to them about that, and we're aware of that. But in the Plan Change 7, that to do the augmentation, you have to cover those sort of issues off.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So you wouldn't be looking to drill additional groundwater bores and use that for augmentation? I think you've hinted that there's...
No, we've tried that, and Wayne and the Seaforth, Wayne Keller, when he talks to his statement, he will explain that he has tried that and hasn't been successful in the past. The trouble is, there may be some water there, but just because we're right near the coast, the wells are unstable. They just cave in, and
Yeah. Okay. No, that's helpful. Look, no more questions for you, Mr. O'Kane, or in terms of the legal subs, but to the 42A reporting team. There are some targeted stream augmentation provisions in the Waimakariri section of Plan Change 7, Section 8, which are quite specific and would seem to address very similar issues. When in your reply report, can you look at those provisions? So the definition of TSA in Section 8, Policy 8419 in Section 8, and the rule suite 8518 to 8520 that are in Section 8 of the WIMAC, or the WIMAC section of Change 7, and just address and reply whether or not the officers are of the view that those provisions could be mirrored here to address the concerns that have been expressed by the submitters this morning. Okay, thank you very much for that. And if that was to occur, I imagine they'd slot in somewhere around Section 14.441. That's where the Timaru provisions seem to start in the OTOP section of the plan, so that might be a logical place to slot them. And so when you do that, you can maybe look at the explicit wording that was in the submission that sought these new rules and compare them to the rules and policies in the WIMAC section and see if there's some kind of merger that could come up with a sensible solution. So obviously what I'm asking the officers to do is look at that for us. That doesn't mean necessarily they'll agree with that or that we will either, but it just will give us the option of having some provisions to look at in recognition of the issues that you've raised. All right, but no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Kane, I wonder whether I can come back to the point that you made in your summary of your statement concerning the eels in the Mataitai Reserve. Currently, tuna, eels being trapped and taken as mahinga kai?
Yeah, I think that is correct, Commissioner, yeah.
Are they taken from the drain?
Yes, yes, they are, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. O'Kane. I think we now come back to Ms. Hornsey to see whether there's anything further she wishes to say in respect of the O'Kane submission.
Thank you. I have had given some thought to your question regarding the submission that the general rules were insufficient, and I note that in section 5 there is a catch-all rule, rule 5.6, but it doesn't provide the certainty that the O'Kanes are seeking. It basically says that if in this case, application for augmentation contravenes a section of the Act and there is no specific rule elsewhere, then it will be a discretionary activity. So our submission is that the specific policy and rules we are seeking are appropriate.
And that's an RDA, a restricted discretionary.
That's what we're seeking, yes.
Anything else that you would like to say in respect of the O'Kane submission?
No, thank you, sir.
Are you going to represent any of the other submitters who are here, who we're hearing this morning?
No, sir, my role was really to coordinate their appearance and to just assist them with preparing for the hearing. I'm not here formally to represent them.
Well, thank you for your part. Do we now come to the Seaforth Farm submission?
Yep.
And that's where we have Mr. Kelleher, is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Kelleher.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
Just pause a moment while I bring up your submission in place of Mr. O'Kane's. Now, Mr. Kelleher, we have your original submission, and we also have the hearing statement that I think Ms. Hornsey might have helped you present. And we now give you the opportunity to explain it to us and speak to it just as you would choose.
Thank you. I'm just highlight a few things. So first of all, we've been trying to dig for water, and as Kevin had said, we've gone. There's four or five others have dug wells. We've gone to 220 metres, and pretty much we found little dribbles of water, but the ground's not won't take it. It just keeps collapsing on us all the time. So, and you know, the cost of a deep well, you're looking at $1,000 a metre. So I mean, you can do the math yourself. And we're a cropping farm, so the timing of restrictions for us is critical. So October to mid-January is when we really need our water, and if we miss something, then we can't get back what we have lost. Our 12 months is not gone, but we've lost the top end of it. So it's not like a pasture farm where you can bring in some supplementary feeds or anything. Once we've lost that one timing, then yield's gone, you can't get yield back again. And we're growing everything from veggie seeds, grass seeds, leasing ground for potatoes and carrots, cereals, so running a bit of everything. And all our crops, we set everything up for a top yield, because obviously with what you owe and what the land's been worth, we sort of have to go for a top yield, otherwise we're not paying our bills. So if yields dropped by a third, then our business basically becomes not very viable. So that's why we're seeking the augmentation of the drain to get our production at the critical time that we need as a business, but at the same time we are protecting the drain and the Washdyke lagoon. So the augmentation obviously is not just for us, we're talking everything that's in it, the eels, there's whitebait in there, and we want it all to work with all of us, for not just ourselves, but we need everyone to get together and everyone to work together. As a farm, we've fenced off all our waterways. We planted over 500 native trees this year. We're committed to sustainable farming. We're running GPS fertiliser, we've got moisture probes, we're doing what we can, we think what we can to keep the drain as clean and tidy as we possibly can. We also feel that the farm is now in a better state with better improvements now than it was 30 years ago. This is a family farm, so we're in third generation, there's a fourth one potentially coming up. And there's been improvements and gains all the time. So again, this is to keep our business going, to keep as many people happy as we can. This is why we are seeking the augmentation of the drain. Thank you.
That's a very good summary position. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Kelleher. Commissioner Van Voort, is there any questions of Mr. Kelleher?
Yes, thank you. So how deep are your existing groundwater bores across the group?
On all of mine, the water's between 8 and 12 metres.
Okay.
And over most of that, the whole of that area, no one's really got
Yeah,
anything deeper than 15 metres.
Yeah, I'd say most of Seadown would be at that.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a lot more water still under there, but
Yep.
we just obviously these are existing streams, and like we've been irrigating at home for we're one of the first in the 70s. So.
Yep, no, that's good. No, I just wanted to get clear in my mind how you've drilled these very deep groundwater bores and haven't been successful, so I was just wondering how deep your existing ones were.
Yeah, well, for us, we found no water till we got to 80 metres.
Right.
And then we thought we had that, and that then collapsed on us. So then we've carried on down, down to 226 now.
Yeah.
We found water again, but we can't stop it collapsing.
Right.
So
So is it like a running sands type aquifer that you're punching into?
yes,
those
yes,
depths?
and the grounds, the clay layers above it are obviously quite unstable.
Yeah.
That's what collapses above us.
Yep. And you don't have that problem with your existing bores, the 8 to 15 metre bores?
No, they appear very easy to be fair compared with going deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, no, that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kelleher. Is there someone else in the same category, perhaps Mr. Oldfield?
That's correct, sir.
Are you in the same category, Mr. Oldfield? You
Yes.
want to be heard in relation to the others?
Yes, thank you. It pleases you, sir.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Just pause a moment while I bring up your statement. Mr. Oldfield, I have your original submission,
Yes.
including the historical piece, which is very interesting. Thank you. And the standard schedule of the particular details of the requests that you're making. So now's your opportunity to speak to all of that, if you will, please.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Mark Oldfield. I'm married to Adrian and we have 4 children. I've lived and farmed in Seadown for 63 years. The children say, it's quite sad really, Dad, you've never left home. I am a member of the Seadown Water Users Enhancement Group and Seadown Drain Board, having been a former chairman of the OP Rating District Group as well. I support Mr O'Kane's submission. I've been a Canterbury Regional Councillor and Commissioner 1997-2010, first proposing a water plan through the Natural Resources Regional Plan for Canterbury. 2 farmers actually proposed that. That eventuated in some 60,000 submissions, with 20,000 submissions wanting to be heard. Apparently, it's all my fault. Due to miscommunication, I acknowledge I have missed a critical opportunity to submit earlier in the process. I seek from the plan change to augment the Seadown drain so that the minimum flow is maintained and the members of the Seadown Water Users Enhancement Group can continue to irrigate whilst any minimum flow is maintained. As Mr O'Kane has stated, we have canvassed through Luke Rehana, who's part of a family farming in the affected area, his views with the local Arawhanua Renanga, and they are currently not opposed to augmentation. Our family has farmed in Seadown since 1890. Our small dairy farm was established by my grandfather upon his return from World War I, having lost the leg in the war. We have always tried to farm sustainably with conservative stocking rates and all drains fenced for many, many years. We have implemented technology as available with improvement in water measurement, including moisture probes, effluent storage and application, including pivot fertigation. We also monitor our nitrate-nitrogen concentration in our groundwater. The latest analysis, 14th of September this year, 2020, by Hill Laboratories, Christchurch, showing 2 milligrams per litre, which is well below the maximum acceptable MAV 11.3 nitrogen concentration. We have planted at our own costs plants for nitrate uptake and indigenous biodiversity, as many other members of our group have done. We strive to leave our farms for future generations better than we found them. We, like others, have spent considerable time and money trying to find alternatives to our current bores, to no avail. To not have the ability to augment the Seadown drain reduces reliability both for quantity and quality of production for all our farming enterprises, with resultant financial and very, very real mental stress, especially amongst the younger members of our group. Our family has survived wars, economic depressions, floods, droughts, coastal erosion, and that was touched on earlier. We've lost 24 hectares of our farm over the last 100 years. Others have lost 70 hectares. That's where the wetlands are, the so-called Seaforth wetland. They've gone out to sea, I'm sorry to say. Also, pestilence on our land. I find it ironic that we pay thousands of dollars in rates for drainage and stockbank protection from the sea for water exclusion, and now possibly face thousands of dollars to keep water in. Our fear is without the ability to augment the Seadown drain, our farming enterprises and lives will be damaged and compromised with very real consequences. Thank you for your consideration.
Well, thank you, Mr. Oldfield. Commissioner Van Voorthuizen, any questions to ask of Mr. Oldfield?
No, thank you. But just a further matter for the 42A reporting team. Just in terms of the table 14Z minimum flow for the drain, can you just in reply clarify whether or not the rider report was available to the officers when that minimum flow was set And if so, was it considered? And if it wasn't available and not considered in reply, can you have the officers and technical staff have a look at that report and then just come back to us on their views about the minimum flow, 100, 150 or something different? Thank you. But no further questions.
Yes. Mr. Oldfield, there was something that you said in your presentation a few minutes ago that I don't think I quite grasped, and I'd like you just to come back to it again. You were referring to a value, an MAV, and I didn't quite grasp the context of that. Would you come back to that, please?
Well, the relevance of that possibly isn't so much for the augmentation of the drain, but is the nitrogen concentrations in the levels planes have been identified, rightly or wrongly, as being very high. There seems to be an extreme paucity of information in terms of quality information gathering in this area. I've been to four or five meetings earlier in this process asking hydrologists, if they would please identify where those ground truthing bores were to get their values. The only two I've been able to ascertain was one to the east of the Ravensdown fertiliser, was works but plant, where in 1993, at least that far back, they identified a plume of nitrogen from that source. And the other area where there was bores where they've been ground truthing is to the east of the Kerrytown village, I suppose you'd call it, not village, but lifestyle blocks, where there are a lot of septic tanks. In both instances, staff conceded that, well, yes, that was probably a probable cause of higher areas there. The MAV, as I'm sure you're probably aware, is the World Health Organisation standard for drinking water standards. At level 5 normally is a red flag for cause of concern. But what I'm saying is all my ground truthing from my own bores, we drink our water, our children drink our water from our own bores consistently have been at 2. So it's all very well doing models and desktop inventories from afar, but when it comes down to the local area, there's nothing that beats ground truthing. And the same applies in actual fact. If you look at the Ryder report, you'll note there's very intermittent and very poor records of any flows or any information relating to the sea-down drain. It all seems to be a desktop exercise. And where the 150 came from, no one can tell me where it came from. It seems to have been plucked from the air.
Good, I've made a note of that.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Oldfield, for coming in and joining your neighbours and giving us your take on it. We're grateful to you as well.
Thank you, sir.
Now, is that all of the submitters who are wanting to be heard together?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Well, again, our grateful thanks to all of you. It's been good to hear what you've got to say and to see the support that you have brought with you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Ms. Fernando, Is the next submitter to be heard the Pye Group?
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. Presentation. Oh, no, that's,
have you got it?
okay. That's it there. Thank you. Okay. I can, yeah, do that now. Thank you.
Well, good morning and thank you for coming in. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, we have already read your original submission, of course, and we have the presentation that you've sent in and which you'd like to speak to, I'm sure. But perhaps you'd start by introducing yourselves.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning and thank you for the opportunity to present. My name is Michelle Pye and today I'm joined by my husband Leighton. We also have with us Josie Murray who works for us and will introduce herself shortly. Together we own and operate Pye Group, which along with the associated entities is a large-scale cross-sector farming business located in various parts of Mid and South Canterbury. Would you like me just to carry on, or?
Yes, you just presented it as you've done.
Okay, thank you.
We're
So you'll have our submission and it contains a lot of information about who we are and what we do and the range of measures that we've already taken and continue to take to ensure our environmental impact is reducing. We've then outlined our main concerns with the proposals in Plan Change 7. So because the purpose of the RMA refers to managing physical resources in a way that enables people and communities to provide for their social, economic and cultural well-being, today we want to focus on some of those aspects rather than scientific data which we will leave to our various industry bodies to represent. The size and scale and diversity and efficiency of our business enables us to help support the social and economic well-being of our people and our communities, and that's what makes Leighton and I tick. That's what we like doing. So I just want to make it very clear that it's not the intent of the plan change that we're opposing, it's how it's practically applied. We want to improve our impact on the environment and water quality and farm for a better future, and we've demonstrated this through the changes we've made to date, our involvement with Dairy NZ's Meeting a Sustainable Future project. We were named finalists in the NZDIA Responsible Dairying Award, and myself, I was the only farmer on the inaugural Fonterra Sustainability Advisory Panel. So we've got a few pictures for you today just to help tell our story. This is our business. It's a family-owned business owned by Leighton and myself, and we've largely expanded since 2002. We now directly employ approximately 70 people, and when we include the teams on our dairy farms that are employed by our contract milkers, that number is around 120 people. So that means that there's approximately 100 families that directly rely on our farms for their livelihoods. And we take this responsibility very seriously. We contribute around $40 million annually to the local economy through wages and on-farm expenses, and this is before allowing for money spent on capital projects and interest. We've had a focus on expansion over the last 10 to 15 years, but now we've got a very, very clear focus on improvements, efficiencies, and lowering our environmental footprint. So we've included in our submission that you have details of the extensive environmental actions, which are mostly voluntary, that we've taken over the last 10 to 15 years. It's a long list and it's got a big price tag, but we've been happy to make this investment in playing our part to improve environmental outcomes. You'll see on this slide that we have fingers in a lot of pies, and that includes cropping, contracting, transport, grazing and dairy farming. Today I'm going to focus mostly on our carrot and potato production, because this is one area where we will be majorly impacted if Plan Change 7 goes ahead as proposed. So I understand that you heard from a number of the potato industry yesterday. We were at a Fonterra meeting, so weren't able to watch and haven't been able to see it online yet. So our submission is quite separate, and we've prepared it with no idea of what was presented yesterday. Pye Group currently produces around 17,000 tonnes of carrots for Juice Products New Zealand and 12,000 tonnes of potatoes for McCain Foods. Both of these processors are located in Washdyke, and they're major contributors to the local economy and community through employment. In addition to this, we also produce a similar amount of both potatoes and carrots through Highfield, which is a farm that we jointly own with Leighton's father. So this is Leighton's father in the old header picture on the screen here. It's a photo that was taken around, the black and white photo, it was taken around 50 years ago, and now proudly takes up an entire wall of our new office. It's a sign of respect to the value of family, hard work, and never forgetting the progress you've made. So as you can see, farming, and more specifically potatoes, have been part of Leighton's life since before he can remember. The equipment has changed, productivity has increased dramatically, technology now plays a major part, and our drive for continuous improvement is still there. This includes improvements to the environment and the land, which provides for us, our family, our team, their families, the next generation and the wider community. So this growth and improvement will cease if Plan Change 7 restricts commercial vegetable growing to a baseline area. Our people and our community are part of who we are. Our vision is to have an outstanding agricultural business that's respected in our community. We know that we need to support the people in the communities that support us. So we ensure that we are involved in our local community, not only through sponsorships, but also through involvement in career days, supporting people with training and a wide range of industry involvement. Our business, our history of family farming and our support for our people in the community is all at risk if the proposed changes in Plan Change 7 seriously affect our ability to continue producing the volume and variety of products that we currently produce. As this will have flow-on effects for our processors and the wider community also. One of the main strengths of our business is our diversity, both in what we farm and where we farm. So the ability for us to utilise land to best suit soil types, location and crop rotation enables us to be highly productive and achieve efficiencies due to the utilisation of skills, systems and assets. However, this diversity of farming type and location does make it hard to practically apply rules that appear to have been developed for simpler operations in one sector or one location. So as we've outlined in points 36 to 41 of our original submission, we feel that they've been written without having a correct understanding of how commercial vegetable growing forms part of a much larger farming operation, and have serious concerns about how we're going to practically apply those rules. The standard crop rotation for potatoes is about 8 years. In addition to this, virgin land grows the best crops with high yields and less disease. So modelling shows that higher yielding crops have less nutrient leaching to groundwater, and we therefore seek to lease around 100 hectares every year outside of our own land holdings that has not been used for growing potatoes in the past. So with carrots, the crop rotation is 6 years. So in order to meet our contracts each year, we rotate both carrots and potatoes around different farms, both owned and leased, in different areas with different nutrient allocation zones. So the proposals in Plan Change 7 will make this really difficult, if not impossible. So the map on the screen here shows the approximate location of the crops of both Pye Group and Highfield, the potato and carrot crops for the last couple of years. The yellow stars are crops where that were grown on land we own, and the red stars are crops that were grown on short-term leased land. So that's land that's leased just for the season of growing the potatoes. It's getting harder and harder to lease land, as you need to find somebody who's willing, able, and has appropriate irrigation systems and nutrient budgets. So the proposed restrictions on increasing areas used for vegetable growing in Plan Change 7 will seriously affect our ability to lease land and even rotate crops around land that we own. So this will lead to a reduction of the amount of potatoes and carrots that are able to be grown in Canterbury, that not only affects our business but also the processors we supply in the wider community. So the proposals in Plan Change 7 are restricting commercial vegetable growing to a baseline area, to one nutrient allocation zone, unless you get a further consent. So we fail to see how we're going to be able to comply with this, given our commercial vegetable operation forms part of a much larger farming operation. It's unclear to us how the seasonal leases will be treated, and on the face of it, Plan Change 7 will mean we'll no longer be able to lease paddocks from other farmers because they won't have a baseline, having not grown vegetables before. This will really limit our ability to continue to produce a similar volume and variety of crops. And if we consider this from a region-wide perspective, the ability for any growth is seriously limited, which in turn limits the growth not only of our processors but also our seed suppliers, which is a huge industry in its own right. And although I wasn't able to watch yesterday, I did see a slideshow where you saw a picture of our new potato seed store that the McCain growers are currently building to support this growth industry. So this is a project that I've led for the last 3 years and spent a lot of voluntary time on getting that off the ground. And the proposals put that $8 million project at risk of being underutilised and inefficient, putting additional cost on growers. So we question the reason for a specific restriction on vegetable growing when we are already regulated and managed by existing policy, land use consents, nutrient budgets and farm environment plans. Our understanding is that commercial vegetable growing was targeted in the plan change based on modelling, which has since proven to be incorrect. We understand that recent research has shown that nutrient losses are much less than originally thought. Commercial vegetable growing is not restricted in the essential freshwater policies, and it is actually promoted in the Primary Sector Council's Fit for a Better World document, which seeks to further invest in horticulture. So we therefore seek to have any reference to commercial vegetable growing removed from Plan Change 7, and instead the operations are managed through the existing framework of land use consents, farm environment plan and nutrient budgets, which do not seek to restrict the type of crops you grow on your land, but rather the outputs. I'll just move on to another point I'd like to make. From a practical compliance view, we have concerns about timeframes proposed in the plan change and capacity of ECAN to be able to implement the changes and process consent applications, in addition to changes that will be required under the essential freshwater policies. Maintaining compliance with regional and central government policies has become so complex that no farmer can navigate this on their own without the assistance of a consultant, adding further cost, complexity and compliance management to an already complex farming business. So we have numerous examples of lack of capacity and capability within ECAN and the wider environmental compliance industry, but I just want to highlight two, if I may. Recently, we formally objected to a consent processing charge under Section 357 of the RMA. We had a land use consent for a 67 hectare block charged to us by ECAN at over $12,000 excluding GST, so that's approximately 3 times the normal charges for a much larger farm. This was just ECAN's charges and didn't include the cost of external consultants or our own internal resources. After objecting twice, the amount was discounted and we dropped our objection, but the main reason for the elevated cost was ECAN staff weren't trained to process the consent application using the alternative pathway, and we were effectively paying for them to learn how to do their job. We have another land use consent that between our external consultant and ECAN's been in the process for nearly 2 years, and it's still yet to be issued by ECAN. And we haven't used these examples to be disrespectful of ECAN or their staff or consultants, but more to highlight the lack of capacity and capability across the entire industry, which, like farmers, are working harder than ever to keep ahead of the avalanche of compliance that keeps coming at us. So, to sum up, we have genuine deep concerns that if some of these proposals become operative, the negative effects will not only be to our business and therefore our ability to be positive contributors to communities, but also our processes and ultimately the wider community. The solution we're looking for is a simplified compliance through the existing framework of land use consents, farm environment plans and nutrient budgets. And to be honest, that's not even simple, but it's a system we already have in place. You could argue that Plan Change 7 allows us to do that, but by specifically referring to commercial vegetable growing, you're just adding another level of complexity that we don't believe is required. Let us manage our land using existing tools to drive improvements to nutrient losses rather than by regulating the types of crops we can grow, please. And the message I really want to leave with you, and I did steal this quote off somebody else, is that you don't improve water quality from the farm office. The fastest way to slow down progress is to regulate it. Josie, who you'll hear from in a minute, has worked for us for over 18 months, and she spent virtually her whole time on compliance. If we were able to invest that time and money into technology like fitting variable rate irrigation to our pivots or research into mitigating N-loss, we would have a far greater impact on water quality. We're looking forward to the day when compliance is easy and Josie spends time on enhancement and we can actually make faster progress towards a better future. So I'll hand over to Josie now, who's going to cover a few technical points, and then I'm happy to answer any questions if that's okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that splendid presentation. We will have one or two questions about it, but let's hear from Ms. Murray now.
Thanks, Michelle, and good morning, Commissioners. So my name is Josie Murray, and I am the Environmental Compliance and Enhancement Manager for Pye Group. My role is to provide farm environmental advice, support and education for Pye Group and its farmers to achieve their environmental goals. I myself grew up on an arable farm, so I have a strong connection and passion for farming and our environment. I will briefly discuss about our thoughts on the proposed high nitrogen concentration area and stage reductions within the Rangitata Orton area. We have concerns surrounding the negative effects on Pye Group as a business, individual farmers in the area and the wider Rangitata community. Firstly, we believe the spatial content of the Rangitata Orton area and the reductions have been proposed using an ineffective blanket approach across 3 different nutrient allocation zones. All these zones currently have a different water quality status as identified by the current Canterbury Land and Water Regional Plan. We believe there is insufficient supporting water quality evidence for the current proposed mapped area to become operative. Therefore, we propose that the green nutrient allocation zone, as shown in the map on the PowerPoint, be excluded from the Rangitata Orton area and be held to good management practice levels under a land use consent to farm. We have 10 farms within this area that would be affected by the proposed reductions. All of these farms have or are in the process of retaining a land use consent to farm and are operating a good management practice. All farms have a farm environmental plan which are updated each year with actions to continue mitigating environmental risks and enhancing biodiversity. These farm environmental plans are audited along with an annual nutrient budget to allow us to monitor our year-to-year nutrient losses. we feel really proud of the significant improvements we have already implemented on farm to reduce nutrient losses and improve our environmental footprint. I'd like to just give a few examples. So Scott's block is a dairy support block grazing winter fodder crops and pasture. Our baseline to begin with was 132 kgs of N per hectare per year. Our GMP loss rate is 79 kgs of N per hectare per year. Therefore, we have already made a 40% reduction in N loss. Grantley Dairy is a dairy farm with 3 sheds on it near the Rangitata township. Our baseline was 105 kgs of N per hectare per year. Our GMP loss rate is 86 kgs of N per hectare per year. Therefore, we have already made an 18% reduction.
Ms. Murray, just let me interrupt for a moment. We're not familiar with these blocks, so when you come to introduce another block, as you've just done, just be careful that you tell us the name of it carefully and deliberately so that I can make a note of it. Now, you've just been referring to a block, did you say, near Rangitata?
Yeah, so these are just our farms as Pye Group. So is the name important or not?
Well, I think that it's important in the sense that it enables me to distinguish in my mind from the Scott block that you talked about before. So what's the name of the block that you're now talking about, near Rangitata?
Grantley Dairy.
Grantley
Dairy.
And that, what's the
Thank
address,
you.
Michelle?
Okay, so I will continue. We have made and continue to make significant improvements on farm and don't believe we should have to keep making nutrient loss reductions due to a number of reasons. Mitigation strategies become limited going forward as we have already implemented on-farm strategies to reduce nutrient losses at a huge cost, such as improving irrigation infrastructure to be more efficient, reducing applied fertiliser, improving effluent practices, and investing in monitoring technology and software. We're yet to see the hard work and investment from farmers be represented in environmental monitoring due to the lag effects in water quality. Even though these lag effects can take years to be seen, we are confident that water quality will not be getting any worse as it has historically been, due to the many years Canterbury farmers have already put into reducing nutrient losses and improving farm systems. We continue to make more reductions with limited mitigation options will be a huge cost to businesses as it will very likely affect productivity. This will have a massive flow-on effect of negative implications when it comes to the social and economic aspect of local communities, the agricultural industry and the rest of New Zealand. I want to explain a quick example of how the current regulations of meeting GMP are proving difficult without the added proposed nutrient reductions on top. We have been leasing 100 hectares from a local Rangitata Island landholder for the last 3 years. When Plan Change 5 became operative, the process of gaining a land use consent to farm began. The land use consent is still in progress and has been for some time. The options of using the farm portal or the equivalent pathway portal proved in losses to be erroneous. This is a massive issue as it would have resulted in Pye Group terminating the lease agreement as we would no longer be able to justify paying the lease. This would have had serious negative implications and put the landowner's livelihood at risk due to the reduced income. He would have to go back farming and would struggle to make as much as he would be receiving from the lease agreement. We are still working through this consent with Environment Canterbury using an alternative manual pathway to generate a GMP loss rate that will allow us to continue farming the block and in turn continue the lease agreement. With additional reductions from proposed Plan Change 7 becoming operative, we would be left with no option but to terminate the lease. This is just a small example of what we're already seeing within the local community and the negative implications that would be seen in local communities' social, economic and well-being, mental well-being, if we are forced to make further reductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Murray. Commissioner Van Voorthuizen, any questions for Ms Pye or Ms Murray?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much and good morning. Yesterday we heard from Potatoes New Zealand that in terms of potato cropping they had done some monitoring of N leaching rates and were getting results of between 0 and 10 kgs of N per hectare per annum. In terms of your potatoes and carrot growing operations, do you know what the leaching rates from those are?
I don't.
We looked at a few examples for carrots,
Mm-hmm.
and among all our blocks across all our farms, the highest I could find was 40 kgs of N per hectare per year.
Sorry, was that 40 or 14?
40.
Okay.
That was of leaching.
Yeah, of leaching and
Yeah.
loss. Yeah, for carrots.
And what was the range? You said that was the highest. What was the range?
Oh, I didn't fully look
Okay.
at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And potatoes? Did you?
No, I didn't look into that either. But
Just on the carrot one, like yields, we grow a processed carrot, so it's for a juice market. So the bigger
Right.
the carrot, the better,
Yeah.
and the higher the yield.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when we work out a planting plan, we work on an average yield of 120 tonne to the hectare. So, and we've averaged that probably over the last 4 years. And on average, we're only putting on 60 units of N on the crop. And I've always struggled to understand, and even our agronomist Howard, overseer, can tell us it's spitting the same amount of number of N out when we're actually taking 120 tonne a hectare off. And we're going to chase up veg fed after the information that Potatoes New Zealand have told us. I don't think overseer is calculating it right, and there's I suppose there's a lot of modelling work to be done in the next few years of understanding why it's modelling that so high, and it's just hard to believe it hasn't. But up to this stage, nobody will really listen to us. So I think there's a lot more work needs to be done with overseer, and
Yeah.
I congratulate the government for putting all that money into overseer, and hopefully we can get to the bottom of it.
That's right. So the 40 kgs of N per hectare for the carrots, it's an overseer generated number or a measured number from a ceramic cup or something like that?
from overseer.
Overseer.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in your submission, you talk about being in the Rangitata Orton high nitrogen concentration area. Are you in the level plains as well, or just in the Rangitata Orton one?
Just Rangitata Orton.
Okay. And so that table 14 ZC, are you familiar with that? They're the two-stage reductions.
Yes. Yep.
And so I understand you have dairy and non-dairy operations.
Correct.
So in terms of that table 14 ZC, and you've expressed concern about that in the original submission, are you able to meet the 2030 reduction targets, so 10% for dairy and 5% for non-dairy, or are the 2030 targets a problem for you?
I think we are able to meet them, but it seriously limits the way we can farm. Yeah.
Okay.
And removes options for us.
Yeah, and I suppose our concern is that currently meeting GMP for some particular farm systems is very, very difficult. It's producing numbers that are incredibly low, and to have further reductions on top, it doesn't leave you with a lot of options to farm.
Yeah. And the 2035 reductions, which are the next step?
Haven't thought about that one yet, have we? It's like we've got to hit the first target first.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay. And you said it would limit your farming options. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Well, I mean, the most obvious way to meet some of these targets is to reduce productivity, either by reducing the inputs onto the farm. So whether that be less fertiliser, which grows less grass, or less cows, or whatever, it does limit our options in how we farm.
And in terms of your non-dairy operations and meeting the 2030 additional restrictions, will that limit your farming operations in the same way?
Well, the non-dairies are probably the ones that we're struggling to meet GMP, so
Right.
they're probably going to be the more difficult
Yeah.
ones to meet. and partly because what the portals were spitting out for GMP loss rate seemed to drag the number a long way down from the baseline, so it was already a massive reduction that we'd have to make.
You also expressed concern in the submission about the baseline area regarding vegetable growing and the area that can be used. But Potatoes New Zealand suggested to us they were also concerned about that. But one of their suggestions was to change the reference date. So instead of being a 2013, can't remember the exact reference date at the moment, but they were suggesting that the notification date of the plan be used instead, which was July 2019, so that would make it a more contemporary baseline area. Would that address your concerns at all?
Not really, because it makes it difficult if you want to expand production, and I just think it's at odds with the Primary Sector Council's report on Fit for a Better World, and there's a huge amount of pressure on the dairy industry and to grow, and as a good alternative be growing vegetables, yet this really restricts the ability to do that.
So that wouldn't meet your concern primarily because it would still restrict expansion.
I think really the guts of what we're trying to say is it's too hard and it's too complex, and don't add any more complexity. Make it simple. We've got good processes in place on how we monitor nutrient losses, and why do we need to add more complexity to it and regulate what crops we grow? It should be output based, not input based.
Okay, no, thank you. That's just a couple of things I wanted to clarify with you, but no further questions. Thank you.
The only thing I'd like to ask relates to the last piece in the material that you presented, where you've shown us a map of nutrient allocation zones and proposed red data autumn HNCA. And I'm not sure that I've got all that you would want me to have got from your presentation of that, or inclusion of that in the material you've given us.
So I think our main point is that goes across, the green, red and orange zone, and we think the green zone should be removed from that area.
Due to having a different water quality status is currently identified by the Canterbury Land and Water Regional Plan, we were just struggling to understand why there's 3 different zones, but the high nitrogen concentration area has just been kind of laid over all 3 of them.
Now, the copy of the map that I have is not full size, so that's part of the difficulty I'm having, I think. I can't read what they call the legend for the different colours. That's not at the scale that I'm able to pick up.
Would you like me to read them out?
Well, you've been particularly bringing attention to the green one. Would you tell me what the green is supposed to represent on that map?
So water quality outcomes are being met. That's what it's defined as.
Do you see in the top right of the map, there's what they call a legend, and it's got a sample of the different colours and words that relate to that colour. Can you tell me what are the words that relate to the green colour?
Yeah, it's water quality outcomes are being met. So it actually says meets water quality outcomes.
Meets water quality outcomes. Thank you. No, but is there anything you want to add to that in terms of what you're hoping I will get from that map?
No, thank you.
All right. Well, we're very grateful to all 3 of you for coming in and presenting as you have and answering our questions. It's very interesting. and you've presented it clearly, and we're grateful to you all. Thank you very much.
So, sorry, Commissioner Shepherd, just one matter arising from your questions regarding the map, if I may. I think
Yes.
in response to a previous submitter we've heard earlier in the hearing, I think I've already asked the staff to come back to us and reply and comment on the inclusion of the green zone in that high nitrogen concentration area, and to re-examine the rationale for that, and then discuss that in their reply report to us. At the end of the hearing, the staff do a further report to us telling us whether or not they've changed their mind on anything, and I think I've already asked them to address that. And Matthew, that's correct,
Yes,
isn't it?
that's correct.
Yeah, so the staff are already going to look into that for us in response to the issue that you've brought to our attention, but other submitters have as well.
Thank you.
Just let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Fernando, are we expecting to have South Hilton this morning?
There's nobody in the room at the moment apart from us. I'm just going to pop outside just to make sure that there's nobody just outside, and I'll be back in just sort of 30 seconds.
Yes, that's right. That's an excellent idea. Thank you.
Commissioner Shepherd, there's nobody outside, so there's
All
no
right.
one here.
Well, thank you. Then we'll adjourn now and resume at 2 o'clock.
Right.
Ms. Fernando, are we expecting to have South Hilton this morning?
There's nobody in the room at the moment apart from us. I'm just going to pop outside just to make sure that there's nobody just outside, and I'll be back in just sort of 30 seconds.
Yes, that's right. That's an excellent idea. Thank you.
Commissioner Shepherd, there's nobody outside, so there's
All
no
right.
one here.
Well, thank you. Then we'll adjourn now and resume at 2 o'clock.